In this video, we're going to talk about housing prices and more specifically, rental prices. You see, over the last few years, the amount families spend on paying for a place to live has skyrocketed. As you can see in this graph, although wages have increased in recent times, the cost of rents or mortgages has increased ever more. Between 2005 and 2015 alone, the amount of household income spent on housing in OECD countries went up by nearly 6%. And that's only taking into account the changes up until 2015. Let's not even get started on the last few years. The curious thing is that the increase in housing costs has occurred at the same time that other goods such as clothing, electronic devices, and food have done just the opposite. They have become cheaper and cheaper, or at least more affordable in relation to income. So we could say that housing prices have been working against the tide. Unlike the rest of the economy, which is gradually becoming more efficient and productive, housing is a market that not only does not improve like the others, but also seems to be getting worse and worse as time goes by. And frankly, no matter how much politicians do, nothing seems to fix it. So the question is, why? What is causing housing to become more and more expensive? Is it a market that is doomed to be inaccessible to the common citizen? Today on Visualeconomik, we're going to answer all of these questions. So, let's get cracking. When politicians or the media try to answer the question we have just asked, that is, the reason rent prices are getting higher and higher, we can basically find the following explanations. The first is usually that if rents are so expensive, it is because there are too many empty houses. Houses that are not rented for various reasons and that contribute to making it very difficult for young people to find a home. The second most common explanation suggests that the problem lies with large companies that corner the rental market and raise prices indiscriminately to maximize their profits. And the third, particularly in popular vacation destinations, is often said to be due to tourism. Housing is no longer offered to local residents, but to tourists. As a result, the price rises. Well, these are explanations usually given by politicians and journalists, but this is Visualeconomik. So now we have to ask ourselves a question. Are these explanations true and consistent with experience, and are they the real cause of increase in rents experienced in recent years? Well, if you like, let's go through them one by one. Pay attention to this news headline.
More than 16 million homes are sitting vacant across the US, according to new research from LendingTree.
As you have seen in this news item, the number of vacant homes in the US is quite significant. 16 million homes. To give you an idea, with that number of houses, you could give a home to all of the homeless people in the US and there would still be 15.5 million properties left over. After that, if we were to distribute the remaining 15.5 million houses at random, it would be enough to give a new home to all the citizens of entire countries like Belgium and Sweden, and as if that were not enough, it would still be between 3 and 4 million houses left over to continue distributing among new neighbours. In other words, there is an abundance of empty houses in the US, houses that, if put on the market, would apparently be enough to put an end to the housing problem. However, do not think that the phenomenon of empty houses is something exclusive to the United States.
Scandal of Europe's 11 million empty homes. In Spain, more than 3.4 million homes lie vacant. In excess of 2 million homes are empty in each of France and Italy, 1.8 million in Germany, and more than 700,000 in the UK.
As you can see, it seems that the phenomenon of empty houses is more widespread around the world, which could also explain the increase in housing and rental prices worldwide. So the question is, why do the owners of all these homes prefer to leave them empty rather than live in them, sell them, or rent them? Well, according to political and media theory, it's basically for speculative reasons. That is, they're using housing as an investment and not as a consumer good. Possibly also because there are large fortunes that like to hoard homes as if they were trophies. For whatever reason, the point is that with so many vacant houses, when the regular citizens want to find an apartment, they have to pay a lot of money for the few that are available. Hence, the price increases. Or, well, at least that's what the theory supported by many politicians and media outlets says. But I'm afraid that in reality, the evidence tells us something different. Take a look at this map. In March 2022, LendingTree studied the number of empty properties in municipalities with up to 50,000 inhabitants in the USA. On the screen, you can see only the 10 of them with the highest percentage of empty homes according to this study. Well, do you know the funniest thing of all? LendingTree not only calculated the percentage of empty homes, but also studied the reason why the homes in the 10 municipalities we just showed you were empty. And what they found was this. Practically 80% of the empty dwellings were empty because they were destined for recreation or vacation uses. That is, houses for weekends or summers. And Visualeconomik viewers, this may seem irrelevant. I don't know, at the end of the day, we could say that it doesn't matter why there are empty houses. The important thing is that they exist, and that contributes to the increase in the price of rents. However, the fact that most of the vacant homes in these municipalities are for vacation or recreational use gives us an important clue. Empty homes in the US are not in urban residential or work centers, but are in vacation spots where the middle and lower income earners don't really want to live. In other words, vacant housing does not affect the price of rents in the most sought after areas. But maybe you are not convinced by this analysis at the municipal level and you want something more comprehensive. Well, here's a question. Can you tell us which states have the most expensive rents in the United States? Let's take a look. Among the 10 most expensive states in terms of paying rent in the US are California, New Jersey, Massachusetts, and Colorado. And guess what? All of these states are also among the 10 states with the lowest percentage of vacant homes. Likewise, and to offer data from a European country, cities such as Munich, Frankfurt, and Berlin are the most expensive cities in Germany to live in. On the other hand, cities such as Dortmund, Essen, or Leipzig are almost half the price. Well, it turns out that the cheapest cities have the highest percentage of empty houses, up to 15 times higher than in the most expensive cities. In other words, when rents are expensive, there are usually fewer empty homes than in other places, just the opposite of what so many politicians and the media usually argue. And this basically makes sense. If you have a house in a place where rent is very expensive, you can generate a lot of money by renting it out, so your incentive to leave it empty will be lower. But as if everything we have just told you was not enough, in case you think we have chosen cities carefully so that everything fits our narrative, take a look at this graph. Since the great financial and real estate crisis of 2008, the percentage of vacant houses in most countries affected by high rents has only decreased. If empty homes were the cause of the rise in prices, this graph would have to show a completely opposite trend. So in a nutshell, no, empty houses are not the cause of the increase in rental prices that has been suffered around the globe in recent years. But what about the rest of the arguments that the politicians and the media often use, such as that greedy businessmen or tourism are to blame? Well, regarding tourism, it is true that at the local level, an increase in the number of tourists can increase the price of rents. For example, in two studies referenced on the screen and the adoption of Airbnb in Los Angeles and Barcelona, it was found that the effect of this type of tourist rental increased residential rental rates by 2 to 3%. But in spite of this, this argument is not able to explain the phenomenon of the general rise in rents. That is, rents have risen in most countries in the world, whether they are tourist destinations or not. So that can't be the reason. Thirdly, as for the argument of large companies, take a look at this news item.
Large investors only manage 3% of rented housing.
The news you have just seen refers to Spain, but the data for the US is very similar. According to a Harvard report, large corporations only manage 3.3% of the rental market. Big companies that, by the way, compete with each other. So what can I say? In order to manipulate the entire market, it would be necessary to have a much larger share than a mere 3% distributed among dozens of large companies. So at this point, the main arguments that politicians and the media typically use to explain this problem do not seem to be too convincing. What then are the real causes of rising housing prices worldwide? Why is my rent so expensive? Well, let's take a look.
A pressure cooker.
Let's cut to the chase. If we want to know what is really causing the worldwide increase in rental prices, we have to find a reason or reasons that affect everyone in a similar way. Can you think of any reason we could be talking about? Well, take a look at the following graph. It's no surprise if I tell you that over recent decades, the enormous increase in life expectancy, the baby boom, and the consequent aging population has caused populations to increase all over the planet. This population increase implies two things. The first is that more people need houses to live in than 50 years ago. The second is that all these new people have contributed to economic growth, which has, in theory, increased wages considerably. Conclusion, not only are there more people, but people are able to pay more for rent, which has led to the demand for rental housing skyrocketing. But what happened to the supply of housing during all this time? Well, just what you're about to see on screen. In an ideal world, where the number of housing units would have increased in line with the economic and demographic development of countries, the relationship between income and the volume of housing construction should have followed the red line. However, as a general rule, and contrary to what we might think at first glance, in most countries, despite the fact that their economies and populations have grown a lot lately, the truth is that they have not been able to build housing at the necessary pace. This, among other reasons, can be explained by the innumerable bureaucratic procedures and urban planning limitations that exist, and also due to the lack of public investment in housing. A lack of public investment that, especially in the last 20 years, has collapsed to a third of what it once was. But as if this were not enough, another element to take into account, and which has boosted the demand for housing even more, has a lot to do with cultural changes. You see, 30 or 40 years ago, houses used to be occupied by families with 2, 3 or more children. However, with the drop in the birth rate, the increase of divorces in Western countries, and the delay of married life, there are now fewer people living together. That is, there are now many more singles, like myself, who now need a small apartment for themselves, or smaller families who do not need very large houses. So what's the problem here? According to an OECD report, the problem lies in the fact that housing has not been renovated and adapted to these new needs. There are large houses that, for example, would be more useful if they were divided into 2 apartments to be rented by 2 single people. However, if we had to choose one main factor causing the increase in housing prices, it would surely be this.
Rural depopulation in a rapidly urbanizing America. 746 counties, representing 24% of all US counties, are depopulating, and nearly all of them, 91%, are rural. University of New Hampshire. Over the past decades, the shrinking population has become the normal trajectory for many rural regions. By 2050, the population of Europe's urban regions is projected to increase by 24.1 million people. By contrast, the population of predominantly rural regions is projected to fall by 7.9 million.
It is no longer just that there are more people looking for a house than years ago, nor that people earn more money and bid more for rents, nor even the important cultural changes we have just mentioned. Perhaps the most significant cause for the rise in housing prices is the rural exodus. More and more people want to live in cities. On the one hand, because the best job offers are concentrated in them, but on the other, because the city has become a consumer good in itself. You know, shopping malls, universities, big sporting or cultural events. Living in a big city is a necessary asset for many. This has led to increasingly strained rental prices in the cities. And then, of course, the effect of low interest rates on hot sites should be analysed and studied. But that's for another video. The fact is that in contrast to the price increases in cities, in rural areas, rents have plummeted. As you can see on the screen, this has meant that in reality, in real terms, prices, including urban and rural areas, have not increased too much, only between 1 and 2%. And you see, rent is actually not much more expensive than it was a decade ago. In fact, in countries like Italy or Germany or Belgium, rents are cheaper today than they were 10 years ago. The real problem is in the big cities, not in countries as a whole. In cities like Frankfurt or Munich, where more and more people want to live, the huge pressure cooker of housing is heating up. All this, added to the reasons we gave earlier and not other conspiracy theories, is what really explains why rents are becoming an even greater expense in the budgets of both individuals and families. But be that as it may, having come this far, it's now over to all of you. Did you expect these to be the real reasons for the cost of rents? What are other reasons you can think of that we haven't discussed? Do you think that with the low birth rate and the rise in remote working, the pressure on rents in large cities might ease? You can leave me your answers in the comments below. If you like this video, like it, subscribe, and activate the little bell button down there so you don't miss any of our great content. And of course, we'll see you next time.